This is a miraculous story called Rising Water. When it rains, it pours, and now Paris's favorite superheroes have to fight an akuma with water powers. Will they be able to hang this new thread out to dry, or be washed away with the tide? It was raining. That, in itself, wasn't a bad thing. After all, Paris needed the rain, and it was actually a nice change from the scorching weather they had been having. Still, though, it was raining. Adrian sighed as he pressed his face against the window of the studio he was in for yet another photo shoot. They were taking a break as they switched between the scenes, and Adrian was desperately wishing for an escape. Usually, he went outside on these little breaks, but because of the weather, he really didn't feel like it. "This is all your fault," Adrian muttered to Plag, who poked his sleepy head out of his pocket. "You didn't like storms even before I showed up. Don't blame me for not liking the rain," Plag answered, tucking himself further into the pocket. Adrian let loose another sigh. He had never liked thunderstorms, and even as a teen, they made him cringe when the really nasty ones, filled with what could only be described as rage, rolled overhead. However, since becoming Chat Noir, he found his distaste for falling sky water had undoubtedly doubled. Cats and water for the most part didn't mix, and he was finding that some cat-like tendencies were creeping into his civilian life, no matter how hard he tried to stop or at least monitor them. "I wonder how Marinette's doing," Adrian muttered to himself in distraction, and to his surprise Plag poked his head out to eye him curiously. "Marinette? The twin-tailed baker's kid?" Plag asked. Adrian shot a glare down at him. "Yes, Marinette. We went on a date with her the other day, remember? It was fun." Fun was actually an understatement. It had been an absolute blast being with her for those couple of hours. He had somewhat accidentally discovered that she was shy around him because she had a crush on him. Adrian had been shocked and flattered, only to come to the realization that he was developing a crush of his own on her. The only thing that had ended their fun that night were the phone calls they received from their elders, demanding that they be home for curfew. Before Marinette could escape them completely, Adrian had asked if she wanted to go on a second date. Marinette had ecstatically agreed, but between school, akuma attacks, and all of his other extracurricular activities, they hadn't yet had a chance. "Oh yeah, the date that you had after you crashed into her and made up that awful lie. You didn't even get me any cheese because you were having so much fun with your girlfriend," Plag chuckled, hurling a grumble from Adrian. "She isn't my girlfriend. I simply asked her out on a second date. She may not even want to be my girlfriend." Plag rolled his eyes but stayed silent. Humans were so very clueless at times, and it would seem that he had found the most clueless one out of the whole bunch. Adrian sighed again and went back to staring out the window, until suddenly he stiffened. Twisting around, Plag quickly saw what had his kitten going on high alert. A black-haired girl in a red polka-dotted rain jacket, boots, and a clear umbrella made her way towards the building, holding a bag full of something. Plag felt his kitten's heart kick up a notch, and even he could appreciate why. Marinette danced through the rain. It was really the only way to describe her movements, as she dodged puddles, people, and still managed to keep herself dry under her clear umbrella. "Marinette," Adrian whispered, and then, before Plag could say a word, he was darting away from the windows, heading for the stairwell they both knew led to ground level. Plag ducked all the way into the pocket, digging in his claws as Adrian literally leapt down the flights of stairs. "Be careful!" Plag yelled, and he felt Adrian's hand wrap around him so that he wasn't jolted quite so much as he jumped down the stairs. "She's here! Marinette's here! Why, Adrian panted, moving as fast as he was able, and by the time his feet hit the bottom steps, he was out of breath. Without even stopping, he burst through the door and darted down the hall, coming to a skidding halt outside the lobby by the desk. Other than the person at the front desk, there was no one else present, and for a moment he wondered if he had been mistaken. Did a girl in a red polka-dotted rain jacket come in here?" Adrian asked the person manning the desk as they glanced up at him bored. "Yes, I sent them towards the elevator. If you see them, give them this for their wet things," they answered, handing him an umbrella bag. "'Kay, thanks, bye!" Adrian yelled, snatching the bag and pelting towards the elevators, wondering if she knew where he was. He was worried that she would get lost or in trouble, since they didn't let just anyone wander around in here. Darting around the corner, he smashed headlong into someone, and in the next instant, he found himself practically laying on top of the very person he had been searching for. Blue eyes met his as he braced himself against the floor just above her. Warmth flooded his system, making his inner chat come out, and Adrian couldn't help himself as he gazed into her bluebell eyes. "We simply must stop crashing into each other like this, Princess." Marinette's eyes widened a fraction as a blush swept across her cheeks. "Sure thing, handsome, but I seem to be the victim here," she answered, without a single stutter and all sass. Since their previous date, they had been spending a lot more time together at school, getting to know each other, and although she still had a massive crush on him, it was no longer completely debilitating. In fact, she had found to her complete enjoyment. It was extraordinarily fun bantering with him. Adrian's forehead creased, although his smile never dimmed. "And how do you figure this collusion was my fault, Princess?" One of Marinette's hands moved, poking him lightly in the chest. You're on top, hot stuff," she managed, her blush darkening and her old nervousness coming back to call, however briefly, as she realized the position that they were in. Adrian blinked, realization dawning, and in the next instant he sprang off of her. "Oh, oh gosh, I'm Marinette, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" Fire burned in his cheeks as he dropped back into a crouch at her side, wanting to help her up and not yet totally sure that she would want his help. Would she be annoyed? She hadn't seemed annoyed when he was sprawled across her, but she may have been simply playing nice. His worries, though, were unfounded, as she looked him in the eyes and started to laugh. Reaching up to ruffle a hand through his hair in such a way that sent shivers down around his spine as she managed to say, "I'm fine, Adrian. Although we collided pretty hard. Are you okay?" Adrian leaned into the touch, eyes closing, wanting to purr as his words slipped out with any filter whatsoever. "I had a soft landing." He froze as her hand froze, and his eyes snapped open as the fire in his cheeks crawled down his neck once more. He squawked, and Marinette busted out laughing, even as her cheeks darkened once more. Adrian was mortified at his lack of class, and he could practically hear Plagg whispering, "Your chat is showing." This time, as he stood, he practically picked Marinette up off the ground, just to set her as quickly on her feet, all the while staring at the ground. "I'm so very sorry. I didn't mean that. I mean, you are soft, but I don't want to be rude or anything. In the next instant, a cookie was shoved into his mouth, shutting him up completely. Chewing automatically, he glanced up to see a wry grin stretching across Marinette's face. "You're digging yourself a bigger hole," she snickered. Adrian swallowed his cookie and took a deep breath, deciding that a change in topic was very much needed. "Did you make the cookie?" Marinette nodded, raising a slightly squished bag of pastries up so that he could see. "You once said that they usually don't feed you at these shops. And since you said that you had a few back-to-back today, I wanted to make sure you had something to eat." Adrian froze. It was so Marinette to worry about whether or not he had something to eat between shoots. "I brought some chicken pastries and a few other things since I wasn't sure what you liked. Do you have time to eat now?" she asked, looking through the bag to make sure that the food wasn't squished like the outside was. "I'm sure if you made them, they're going to be amazing. I'm actually glad you showed up now. We're in between shots, so now's the best time for a snack," Adrian answered. Marinette beamed, warming him to his very toes. "Well, okay then. We just need to find some place to sit." Adrian nodded, glancing back outside, and he realized that he had stopped raining for the moment, however briefly. "Want to sit outside? I'm not sure that they have a cafeteria in this building, and I don't think that they would appreciate us leaving crumbs on their furniture." His last sentence was accompanied by heavy sarcasm, as well as an eye roll, and Marinette wondered if he had first-hand experience with their appreciation. Reaching out, Marinette took his hand and gently pushed him forward. "Let's go then." The warmth of her hands around his made him smile, and after scooping her umbrella up off the ground, Adrian followed her out the doors of the building and across the plaza to where they sat down near a low half-wall. The wall was still soaked from the downpour, and he was quite shocked as she shrugged out of her raincoat so that she could drape it across the wall. "There now, we can both sit and our clothes won't get soaked," she said, and sat down, patting the space next to her. The day, even with the rain, was warm, so she had dressed in a light, cute pink tunic shirt that had ruffles on it, and dark gray tights that went all the way down into her boots. The sight of her practically in a dress had Adrian's mind drawing a blank, and she glanced up at him concerned, as he then sat somewhat gingerly next to her. After a moment of staring, he managed to say, "I don't want your jacket to get dirty or messed up." Marinette smiled. "That's what I made it for, so it's fine." Adrian was on his feet in a second. "You made it? I'm not sitting on something you made." This time, Marinette didn't give him a choice, and reached up to forcefully tug him back down. "If I didn't want it to be used and abused, it would be still be on my mannequin at home still. Here, try this and stop worrying so much," she answered, shoving a pastry in his hands. Adrian shifted nervously, wanting to stand again, but not daring to do so. Marinette had a look about her, one that reminded him strongly of Ladybug, and he didn't want to find out what she would do if he pushed. Shaking the comparison from his head, he bit the pastry and let out a low moan as a flood of richness coated his mouth. "Good?" Marinette asked, as she watched him demolish the pastry. He turned towards her, nodding, mouth still full as he eyed the bag in her lap. With a chuckle, Marinette handed it over, watching him dig through it to pull out another pastry, not realizing that just a few short blocks away, disaster was about to strike. Eva was a swimmer, and she had been looking forward to getting in some practice at the pool. However, things just didn't want to seem to work in her favor today. She had grabbed the wrong bathing suit, her cap for her hair was simply gone, and when she went to put her goggles on around her head, the band snapped. All of these things annoyed her, but what upset her the most was her friends had ditched her, leaving her alone and surrounded by a crowd when all she wanted to do was swim some laps. She had been swimming only a few minutes when the last of her patience had been used up, as some kid nearly jumped into the water on top of her. Snatching her stuff up and seeing that it was still raining outside, Eva decided to go home early, clutching her broken goggles in her free hand. A flicker of purple color was all the warning she had as she walked outside. Then a smooth, rich voice entered her mind. "Hello, dear Aqueous. I am Hawkmoth. Are you tired of being held back like a fish in a tank? Do you wish to swim freely wherever you want?" Hawkmoth asked. Eva blinked as the mask covered her face, the frustration and irritation at the very forefront of her mind. "Yes, that sounds wonderful." "Excellent. All I require are 2 small treasures from Chat Noir and Ladybug in repayment for your freedom," Hawkmoth said. "They will not be able to fathom the depths I will go to regain your treasure," Aqueous answered, as the darkness consumed her completely. Water droplets hit his head, and Adrian forced himself not to hiss. It would seem that the rain had decided to start up once more. Pulling the umbrella he held up as the rain started to pick up. "We should probably get back inside so we don't get soaked. I'm sure they're probably done with switching the sets around by now." Marinette sighed, a little sad that they would have to part ways so soon. She was doing so much better now that her adoration and nervousness had settled into a solid, manageable simmer in the back of her mind. "Did you get enough to eat? I can leave the rest of the pastries with you if you'd like." Adrian shook his head sadly. "They'll take them, since technically they have me on a fairly strict diet." Marinette gaped at him, even as she slid back into her raincoat. "But you're still growing, and you already do all that fencing and stuff. Why would they have you on a diet?" Adrian chuckled, rubbing a hand over the back of his neck. Well, it's fine, mostly." Marinette stomped a foot, looking instantly furious. "If you're ever hungry, just come talk to me, okay? Or come to my house. I already feed Isla and Nino. We don't mind having you, too." Adrian smiled, gently brushing a finger over her cheek. "Thanks for that, Marinette. I really appreciate it. You're really cute when you're angry." Marinette was startled by the touch, and feeling her cheeks light on fire from his words. His eyes, however, were still sad. They had that same aching loneliness that made her want to take him in his arms, and whisper that everything would be okay. The space beneath the umbrella was warm and charged, the only sounds being the rain and their heartbeats beating as one. Reaching one of her hands out, she reached for him, and just as they were about to touch, a scream smashed their private, quiet world to smithereens. Both of their heads jerked up, and without a thought, they ran towards the scream that had come where it had come from. Their speed was evenly matched as they sprinted across the road, where people were fleeing in increasing numbers from. Feet splashing through steadily deepening puddles, they were stunned to see a finned woman glide out from between an alley. The person looked to be about their age, with green-blue hair that seemed to shift and move as if it were underwater. Goggles adorned her head, and her eyes were a solid black, giving her the look of a predator. Her skin was a sandy cream color, with iridescent green scales covering her chest and arms and legs, while her hands and feet were webbed, and her feet looked slightly flippered. Blue and yellow-tinged fins protruded from her calves and forearms, and small yellow dots decorated her rest of her unscaled skin like freckles. Water swirled around her, droplets and streams that hung in the air, brushing past her like breezes, as she seemed to swim forward into the open air. "Oh, wow," Marinette whispered. It was one of the prettiest akuma-sized people she had seen so far, and the person's elegance was a sight to behold. Then she suddenly remembered she was not in costume, and Adrian was standing very much in the path of danger. Reaching out, she grabbed his arm. "Adrian, we need to run," she said, catching both the akuma and his attention. "Oh, how cute. I just love your raincoat. I'm Aqueous. Let's see if you can keep dry around me," Aqueous said, her voice reminiscent of a bubbling stream. Marinette glanced down and realized for the first time that she was wearing her ladybug-spotted coat. "Oh, hell," she whispered, as the water built up into a wave behind Aqueous. Dropping the umbrella, Adrian spun and swept her up off her feet, sprinting back the way they came. For a moment, she could only hang in his arms, staring up at the determined expression he had on his face. She had never seen that look on him before, but it seemed so natural and familiar that for a moment, he reminded her strongly of Chat. He was in danger, though, because of her, and that thought had her wriggling even as he clutched her tighter to him. "Adrian, I can run fine on my own. Put me down and we—" "Go left!" Marinette shrieked, seeing a wall of water heading rapidly towards them. It looked like a tsunami wave rolling at them, with Aqueous riding the crest as if she were surfing. Adrian turned on a dime, darting down a corridor and into another street, only to be swallowed up by another wave that neither of them had seen coming. Marinette was ripped from Adrian's arms by the force of the water, and she tumbled end over end in a strong current. Her body bounced into things several times, and somehow she managed to snag hold of something solid, holding her breath as the water passed down, dropping rapidly to a level that she could kneel in. Coughing, Marinette swiped the water from her face and pulled herself up, noting that several people were lying in the street, slowly moving about and getting to their feet as well. A red head poked its way out of the top of her raincoat. "Marinette, are you okay? What happened?" Tiki cried. Stumbling forward to a nearby alley, she answered, "Apparently, making my raincoat spotted like a ladybug was not a good idea. A new akuma called Aqueous can fight using water, and apparently she doesn't like ladybugs. We need to transform and make sure that Adrian's okay." Stopping behind a dumpster, Tiki flew out of her coat fully. "Are you sure you're okay, Marinette?" Marinette grinned at her Kwame. "I'm fine, Tiki. Just a little wet. Spots on." Launching herself out of the alley, she ran across the rooftops, following the line of destruction in the streets. Only after about a minute, a black figure bounded towards her. "My lady! Have you seen Marinette?" Chad asked, skidding to a halt looking increasingly worried. Ladybug blinked in confusion, for a brief moment as to why he would be asking such a thing. Yeah, she's fine and heading towards her bakery. She had a ladybug coat on. I pulled her out of the water. Have you seen a boy called Adrian? He was with her, but they got separated." Chat sighed, visibly relieved, as he swiftly thought of a lie. "Thank goodness. I pulled Adrian out of the water, and he asked for her. I was worried as well." Ladybug sighed. Adrian was safe, and that was all that she needed to hear. Making a mental note to call him as soon as they took care of this akuma, Ladybug surveyed the area around them. It was still drizzling, the clouds heavy and overcast. Chat didn't seem to be very happy either, his fake cat ears flicking as drops landed on them, and he raised his hand, swiping at the wetness. They were both soaked already, and Ladybug realized with a spark of worry, as a spark of worry pierced through her for her partner. "Chat, are you okay being soaked like this?" Ladybug asked, thinking of how most cats hated water. Chat shifted a little uncomfortably on the rooftop, feeling embarrassed by the level of concern he heard in his voice. "I'm fine, Ladybug. I don't really like it, but I'll be okay. We're not at risk for the moment." Ladybug frowned at his choice of words, but considering she knew the weather was only going to get worse as the day went on, Ladybug decided to trust him. "Tell me if you need to leave, okay? I don't want you getting sick or anything," she said finally, and Chat brightened, following her as she moved down the line of rooftops. "Don't worry, my lady. I wouldn't leave you to flounder alone. I can keep myself afloat," Chat answered as Ladybug groaned. They moved swiftly across the rooftops, frequently darting down into the street to help people up who were trapped, or righting a car that had been flipped in the wave. So far, no one had been badly injured, and they lost Aqueous's trail when they hit the river. They paused at the bank, both of them eyeing the water nervously as they swiped rainwater from their eyes. Before they could discuss their next move, a voice echoed around them, seeming to come from the very water itself. "Ah, Ladybug and Chat Noir. I was wondering how I was going to get your attention," Aqueous bubbled. All the water in the street around them moved, trickling to a single place, and they watched in awe as the water grew into a human shape and Aqueous took form before them, trapping them between her and the river. "Oh, wow," as Chat managed. "Neat trick." Aqueous smiled pleasantly at them. "Thank you. I really enjoy being part of the water. It's so soothing. Unfortunately, I can't keep my powers until I retrieve your Miraculous. So, if you could just hand them over?" Chat pulled his baton out as Ladybug let her yo-yo hang from its string. "Unfortunately, you can't have our Miraculous. But it would be simply swimming if you could give up so we can go dry off." Ladybug groaned, one hand pressing to her eyes. "Really, Chat?" Aqueous laughed, her palms rising towards the sky. "Why ever would you want to be dry? I'd plan to never dry off again. It's too bad that you don't have any flotation devices, though. I suppose I can collect my treasure from your corpses." Her form before them dissolved into nothing once more, leaving the two heroes feeling slightly confused and worried. Movement from behind them caught Ladybug's eyes, and she gasped, grabbing hold of Chat's arm before sprinting forward, pulling them along. Chat glanced behind them and immediately wished he hadn't. A wall of water, light brown and still growing, rose from the river to tower menacingly over the bank. "Go, go, go! Everyone inside now!" Ladybug shrieked at the few people who were either outside in the street or peering from the windows. Aqueous stood on the top of her now-made wave and watched the two heroes trying to flee, amusement drifting through her. A mask flashed across her face, and Hawkmoth's voice answered her mind once more. "I'm impressed you already have them on the run. It's time to reclaim mine once more, and then you can become one with the water and the ocean," Hawkmoth's voice whispered. She didn't bother to answer, having already decided to end the hero's attempted flight. Become one with water once more, the wave dropped, surging after them. Ladybug and Chat heard the boom as the wave hit the street. They could feel the rumble as it gained on them rapidly, the ground trembling beneath their pounding feet. Ladybug had already released Chat's arm, and they pelted down the street shouting for everyone to get under cover as fast as they could. "We need to get to higher ground!" Ladybug yelled, already swinging her yo-yo. "Will that even help?" Chat cried, leaping after her not a moment too soon. The wave swept under them, and it turned as their feet hit the roof, the wave building it back up once more and then surging after them. There was no time for Ladybug to answer, as they both flung themselves to the sky to avoid getting pummeled by the second wave. They darted over the rooftops, slashing at the water when it attacked them in thin streams and spikes that had no end. Leaping behind a half wall, Ladybug snatched Chat from the air with her yo-yo as he passed, and then she threw him to the shingles before pinning him there with her body and her yo-yo string. A wall of water washed over them and past them, nearly tugging them from their alcove, but it swept along, allowing them to stay hidden. For a moment, Chat felt Ladybug go limp against him, probably in relief. Then she shifted, keeping her body low as she climbed off of him. Are you okay? I didn't hurt you, did I? Ladybug asked as he sat up. Untangling himself from the yo-yo string, he flashed a grin up at her. Not to worry, my lady. I'm built tougher than that. Besides, it was better than being swept away, Chad answered, gently pushing a strand of hair back from behind his ear. To his joy, a slight blush dusted her cheeks, and then they both froze as a voice called, Water, water, everywhere, and no bug or cat to be seen. Water, water, everywhere. What are we, playing hide and seek? Glancing at Ladybug, Chat shifted so that he was crouching on his toes in case they had to move fast. Please tell me you have a plan. Ladybug shook her head. Not this time. I'll have to use Lucky Charm and wing it from there. Chat moved forward so that he was up front. I'll protect you. Go for it. Ladybug grinned at him, scratching out a spot just underneath his chin, and stood. You always do, kitty cat. Lucky Charm! Her yo-yo flew up into the air and light coalesced, dropping a small polka-dotted bottle into her hands. The front of the bottle read ink, and Ladybug grinned. Something to blind her? Chad asked, and Ladybug nodded, then froze as a scream echoed across the rooftops. Let's go! Ladybug shouted, already leaping towards the voice. 2 streets over, they came to the edge of a roof, and were stunned to see water over 6 feet deep in the shallowest of places, covering the streets and the plaza before them. Most of the people were already thankfully inside due to the rainy weather, but Ladybug and Chat could see that one such person hadn't been so lucky. Is that Isla? Chad asked, eyeing the female who was being imprisoned by a cocoon of water. She was probably trying to get a scoop and got caught again, Ladybug groaned. Chat snorted. What is this, like the 4th time she's done something like this? Shaking her head, Ladybug eyed the debris littering the water. Most of it was just trash, but there were a few things that she knew she could bounce off of. The top of the bus protruded from the water a few feet from where Isla was being held, and figuring that that was a good place as any to attack from. I'll distract our little mermaid. You go grab our hapless citizen, Chat said, a cocky grin firmly in place as he shook his head, spraying water everywhere. Ladybug blocked the spray from his hair with a hand and sighed, resigned to Chat antics. All right then. 1, 2... Found you! A voice called from behind them, and as they turned, a wall of water smashed into them, throwing them both off the roof. They smashed down into the water, and after sinking almost to the street, Ladybug managed to right herself, swimming rapidly for the surface. Moments later, her head broke the surface of the water, and she was relieved to see Chat scrambling into a small tree that was growing in the plaza. Save Isla! Chat yelled, then started yelling horrible fish puns and jokes at the water. The water seemed to almost boil around him, and in the next instant, attacks streamed at him from multiple directions. Treading water, Ladybug threw her yo-yo so that it wrapped around a lamppost, and pulled herself from the water. Swiftly, she made her way over to Isla, and as her feet hit the bus rooftop, she slung her yo-yo out once more, so that it wrapped around Isla's waist. Hauling back, she pulled her from the water cocoon, and onto the semi-surf perch of the bus's rooftop. Ladybug! Isla cried, as Ladybug slung her easily up onto her back, not giving her a chance to do anything but cling to her. She could see Chat dodging water attacks, and while it seemed Aqueous was more than happy to focus on him right now, Ladybug didn't know how much longer it would last. Not now. I've got you. I've got to get you somewhere safe, Ladybug snapped, using her yo-yo to sling them up onto a high balcony. Isla yelped as their bodies took flight, then screwed her eyes shut until she felt Ladybug's feet hit the deck moments later. Practically falling from her back to the safety of the ground, Isla managed to grab her wrist before she jumped away. Wait a second! Chat needs me. It's raining, and the storm's getting worse. Please stop putting yourself in danger, Ladybug cried, her worry for her friend and her partner making her far shorter than usual, although she didn't jerk her arm away. No, you don't understand. There's a kid trapped in the car underwater. The wave was on us before I could get them out, and that's how I got snagged. I'm sorry, Isla murmured, looking downcast. Horror and guilt froze any reply Ladybug had to the back of her throat. Not trusting herself to speak, Ladybug darted back to the railing, looking down into the semi-murky water to try and spot the car that Isla was talking about. After a long moment, she finally did. The car was turned on its side and facing them, bubbles rapidly leaking from the vehicle, and the child was pressed to the sunroof, swiftly running out of air. Ladybug ran several scenarios through her mind and realized that Chat would be far better at getting the kid out. He could use his claws or baton to bust the glass out, while her yo-yo would be cancelled out by the force of the water. Turning back to Isla, Ladybug sighed, the need to save the child now consuming her thoughts. Thank you for being so brave, Isla, but for now, stay here. Chat or I will bring the child to you. Isla nodded mutely, watching Ladybug as she stood on the railing, a calculating look in her eye. Then, in the next second, she was over the edge. Chat, switch! Ladybug yelled as she dove for the water. Chat's head jerked up, and he leapt to a new spot, avoiding yet another water attack. Switch for them was the code for regroup, and seeing her jump across the water using the debris, he realized that she was heading for the bus. Swiftly following suit, they made their way to the bus rooftop, leaping and dodging until they were back to back, their weapons a whirlwind before them as they kept the water from entrapping them or landing a painful blow. What's wrong? Chat demanded, seeing the panicked look in his lady's eyes. There's a kid, trapped in a flooding car, and I don't have the tools to free them, Ladybug answered softly so that Aqueous couldn't hear. I'll run interference up here. Can you get them out? Chat nodded, following her finger to where she was pointing at a discluttered area in the flooded street. Bubbles breaking the top of the water marked the car's position, and he could just make out the upended vehicle beneath the murky surface. Chat knew that he would have to move fast, both for the child's sake and Ladybug's, as she darted away, drawing Aqueous's attention to herself, so that he could work unhindered. Ignoring Plag's hiss in the back of his mind at the thought of jumping into the water, Chat used his baton to throw himself off the bus and over the top of the roof of the car. Plunging into the murky water, he swam down to the upended car, trusting Ladybug to keep Aqueous busy. The child had very little air left in the car, and he paused for a moment as he thought of the best way to get the kid out. Eyeing the sunroof, he figured that the fastest way was to get in was to simply rip the glass off. Digging his claws into the edge between the window and the metal, he applied all the strength he had to rip the sunroof glass off the tracks it sat in. It came away easier than he thought it would, letting several large bubbles drift free from the interior. The child didn't swim out, and Chat could tell that they didn't realize that he had opened a way out for them. Wiggling in through the sunroof, Chat's head mercifully met an air pocket, and he greedily sucked in air as he braced his feet against the seat in the car door. The child looked stunned to see him, and Chat flashed the biggest grin he had at them. Hey, kiddo, you want to get out of this iron box? Chat asked, keeping his tone light and jovial. The child nodded and threw themselves into his arms. Chat held them close, realizing that they were probably terrified. Pulling back a little, Chat felt the car start to shift, and thinking quickly, he pressed his baton into the child's hands. Don't let go of this no matter what, until Ladybug gets you, okay? Chat asked, and the child clutched it to their chest, nodding. Okay, deep breath on 3. 1, 2, 3. He made a big show of taking a giant breath, making sure that the kid followed suit. Pulling them to him, he forced the kid out of the sunroof and started to follow, only to realize that the car was tilting due to an invisible current. It was then his bad luck truly caught up with him. As he tried to kick free of the car, his boot caught in between the headrest and somehow managed to get stuck there. Knowing that the kid couldn't hold his breath anywhere near as long as he could, Chat reached out and made the staff elongate, sending the kid shooting up out of the water. Moments later, he made out a flash of red through the murky water, swiping the child from the baton, and he retracted it even as the car started to tilt over, rolling on top of him. Twisting and losing air, Chat tried to break free, but only managed to force his whole leg through the gap instead of pulling it out. Cursing in every language he knew in his mind, Chat twisted around, managed to slide his upper body back into the sunroof before the car fully turned over on top of him. Using his claws and sheer strength, he ripped the headrest off the seat, finally freeing his leg even as his chest burned. Adrian, you need air, Plag said, sounding panicked. No freaking crap, Adrian thought to himself, looking around the confines of the car. He needed air, and there was simply no air left in the car. Now that the car was upside down and stable, Adrian tried the door, making sure it was unlocked. It didn't open, and he realized that it was jammed. He didn't have time to check all the doors, and Chat wanted to howl in frustration, even as his lungs burned, demanding air. Starting to panic slightly, Chat realized that he would have to bust out. Gripping the seat and the steering wheel to brace himself, he slammed his feet into the driver's side window twice before it shattered outwards, giving him the escape he needed to pull himself out. Lungs burning and visioning darkening, Chat scrambled at the window, hauling himself through into the open water. Trying to kick free of the car, he missed, even as his muscles burned, he attempted to stroke for the surface. A moment later, something pulled on him, holding him back, and even in his oxygen-deprived state, he recognized Aqueous grinning up at him as she held onto his leg. Bubbles streamed from his lips as they curled into a snarl, and he stabbed his baton in her direction, but it simply passed right through her. She gave him a nasty grin in return, and Chat could feel the last bit of frantic energy leaving him as he tried to claw at her. His claws were harmless, passing through her intangible body, and water filled his mouth as he gagged, trying not to breathe. Darkness crowded his vision in spots of streaks, and he clenched his hands, desperately trying to force his spasming lungs not to suck in water. "Adrian, stay conscious!" he heard Plaid cry out, but his voice seemed so far away, and he curled in on himself, unable to figure out why it was so important. A shriek filled the water as darkness surrounded him, and Chat lost consciousness. Ladybug had felt fear several times in her life. Fear of a test, fear of talking to a cute boy, fear of jumping off a building for the first time as Ladybug. Those fears, though, always held a sort of exhilaration attached to them, and as Ladybug, she had come to realize that there were different kinds of fear. Fear of getting hurt, fear of not being able to save someone in time, fear of her trusted partner getting hurt because of her. There was never exhilaration attached to those fears, just a penetrating coldness that didn't leave until the danger had passed. There was no exhilaration now as the coldness stole over her, when she saw that Aqueous was no longer chasing her. "Marinette, Chat's in danger!" Tiki cried, as she dropped the soaked, frightened child into Isla's waiting arms. Without even pausing to make sure that they were okay, she spun and leapt back up to the railing, peering at the water, hoping with all her heart that Chat was on the surface. That hope was instantly dashed. He wasn't anywhere near the surface. In fact, he was still by the car, his body limp and drifting as Aqueous reached for his hands. Fear sang through her veins at the sight, like it always did when Chat took a hit for her or got injured. "Leave him alone!" Ladybug roared, uncaring whether or not Aqueous actually heard her. Launching herself from the balcony, Ladybug aimed for their position and threw the bottle of ink as hard as she could, the yo-yo following swiftly after her. The fear surging through her made her stronger, faster, and although she would never admit it, true fear made her more ruthless. Although Aqueous seemed to be able to make herself one with the water, Aqueous had to become solid in order to claim Chat's Miraculous, and with that, it left her wide open for an attack. The ink bottle smashed into her underwater, the yo-yo breaking it apart on impact, and since her throw had been so strong, the yo-yo actually scored a direct hit on Aqueous's chest, hitting her hard enough to stun her briefly. The water seemed to scream as Ladybug crashed into the surface, the ink billowing up as Aqueous darted backwards, making the water churn an impenetrable black color. "Straight down!" Tiki cried in her mind, and it was impossible to miss the urgency that the Kwami's voice held. The ink made it impossible to see anything, and she swam blindly down until blonde hair filled her vision. Reaching out, Ladybug's hands collided with his chest, and she was happy to feel the bell attached to his neck. That bell meant that Aqueous hadn't yet had the chance to claim his Miraculous. Keeping a firm grip on his suit, Ladybug stroked for the surface, gasping for air the moment her head breached. Pulling Chat's head up, she was horrified when he didn't take a breath. "Chat, breathe!" Ladybug screamed as she tried to keep them both afloat. "How dare you defile my waters!" Aqueous yelled, the water nearby them churning, and Ladybug swore. She needed to get them out of here before Aqueous fully recovered, and before the ink wore off. The problem was that being between holding Chat and keeping her own head above water, she couldn't use her yo-yo with any kind of efficiency. Fear for her partner and the fact that she couldn't feel his heartbeat clouded her mind, making it hard for her to think. "Use his baton to get to safety! Hurry! He doesn't have much time!" Tiki cried, sensing her distress and confusion. With one last gasp, Ladybug sank underwater, reaching for the baton that Chat had managed to hold onto, even unconscious. Pointing it earthward, she tightened her grip on Chat, then hit the button, sending them skyward moments later. Swiftly, she shifted her grip on his body as they fell, so that he was slumped over her shoulder. The moment her feet hit the rooftop, Ladybug took off, watching for any attacks as she leapt away from the scene of the battle. Clearing a street, she vaguely noted that the alleyway wasn't flooded, before landing and looking for a place to hide. A shriek of frustration echoed behind her, and Ladybug darted off the roof, seeing an unused balcony below. The balcony was clean, the space beyond the glass holding an empty room, devoid of any kind of furniture or signs of habitation. Instinctively, she tried the door, and found that her luck held as she slid it open without a sound. Darting inside, she didn't even bother to close the door, and she dropped her to her knees and laid Chat flat out on the ground before her, checking his neck for a pulse. Terror sank a cold blade deep into her gut as she couldn't find one. "Hurry!" Tiki whimpered, and Ladybug swiftly began CPR. Marinette had taken a CPR and basic medical classes before she had started babysitting, since she had wanted to be prepared for anything that might happen. Never in a million years did she ever think it would come in handy. But now as she started the second round of breathing, Chat gave a choking cough and all at once began to breathe once more. Turning him on his side so that any water he spit out wouldn't go back into his lungs, Ladybug's calm facade broke. She sobbed, wrapping an arm around him, pressing her face to his shoulder, only to jump as a bright flash of green blinded her for a second. A black cat-like creature landed on the floor near the mop of blonde hair, and Ladybug scooped the Kwame up as Tiki said, "That's Plag. He kept Chat's life force bound so that you could revive him." Her words made 1,000,001 questions come to mind, but Ladybug knew that this was not a good time for any of them. "That was really hard," Plag moaned, his tiny body shivering with cold and exhaustion. "Thank you, Plag. Thank you so very much," Ladybug choked as she tucked the Kwame to her chest, trying to share what little body warmth she had. Reaching out, she rolled Chat back over onto her lap, since his cough had since settled, and settled into a rhythm of breaths before she received another shock of a lifetime. "Adrian?" she nearly screamed, and Adrian let out a small moan. His eyes flickered open briefly, only to close as he whispered, "Ladybug." His voice was cracked and harsh-sounding, but she was glad to hear it because that meant that he was alive. However, now that he was unmasked, Ladybug felt her own persona clashing horribly with Marinette's. Pressing her free hand to Adrian's face, Ladybug could literally feel her mind going into a shock, until a prickle of pain brought her back. Plag had stuck his tiny claws into her, and as she jerked back he managed to fly from her hand, his bright green eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Now is not the time to go into shock, Ladybug," he managed, as he floated down to Adrian's chest. I know," Ladybug squeaked, and realized that Adrian's skin under her hand was cool and pale. I need to get him warm and dry. I need to get him someplace safe." Pausing and looking around herself, she eyed the completely bare room and puddle that the two of them formed on the floor. There was only one truly safe place that she could think of, and that was home. "Tiki, spots off," she said, and in the next instant she was sitting as plain old soaking wet Marinette, holding out her hands as Tiki flopped into them, looking worn out. Gently, Marinette placed Tiki on Adrian's chest by Plag, and stripped her raincoat off before checking her purse. She had waterproofed the outside months ago, since one unfortunate incident involving Manon in a water fountain, but other than the rain, she hadn't really had any reason to test the waterproofing seal. Opening the purse, she found to Tiki's delight that the cookies within were still dry and safe, good to eat. Eating swiftly, Tiki watched the two teens with concern, as Marinette waited for her to recharge. Marinette had pulled Adrian into her arms so that he was resting against her chest, his arms draped across her legs. She was trying to keep him warm since he had started to shiver, whether from the cold or the shock, they didn't know. Placing her raincoat around him had helped slightly, and now she was ever so gently smoothing the hair from his face. Plag was sitting on top of the raincoat, concern for his kitten showing in his rich green eyes. Seeing Plag shiver yet again, Marinette said, "Oh!" and her hands went to her purse once more. After pulling out another cookie and handing it to Tiki, she pulled out a small handkerchief and crooked a finger at Plag. "Come here, Plag, let me dry you off," she said, and Plag gazed at her, a spark of stubbornness lighting up behind his eyes. Then another shiver rippled through him, and he decided that being dried off was better than being cold and soaked. Marinette was gentle as she dried him off. So gentle, in fact, that Plag almost started to purr at one point. When she was done, she offered him her purse, and he accepted, since there wasn't any place to really go. Adrian, on the other hand, was starting to shiver worse, and although his skin was warmer than it had been, he was still very pale. "Tiki?" Marinette queried as she finished off the last cookie, and after a moment Tiki nodded. "I'll be able to get us home. Hopefully we won't run into Aqueous," she said, floating up into the air. Marinette nodded and took her purse off, before setting it down next to Adrien. Gently, she shifted out from under him, and after a moment's thought, looped her purse around his shoulder, before slipping him into her raincoat the proper way. Fastening the jacket and pulling up the hood to hide his face, she laid him back flat against the floor. "Okay, Tiki, spots on!" she cried, and transformed once more. Marinette took him home. There was no other place Ladybug could take him, especially not untransformed, and her parents, at least for the moment, weren't home. She had checked before climbing in through a window, with Adrien on her back, and figured that they were probably still out shopping or something. Marinette had been terrified that Aqueous would see her running with Adrien, but her luck was with her as she made it home with no problems. The rain outside had started to come down harder, and she left Adrien in her raincoat on her floor as she ran to get towels and blankets. "What are you going to do, Marinette?" Tiki asked as she sprinted back to Adrien's side. "I've got to get him warm and dry. Then I'll worry about Aqueous," Marinette replied, stripping the coat open and pulling off her purse as well. "You're gonna have to change his clothes," Tiki pointed out, and Marinette froze on the spot, her cheeks flushing a bright red as she realized her Kwame was right. "I realize that. I'll just close my eyes or something," Marinette finally managed, and ran to get him clothes that would fit him. Returning with his side with a full change of clothes, Marinette ignored her stuttering heart as she lifted him up and pulled his shirt off. His skin was cool, pale, and he was shivering badly. She needed to get him warm quickly, and then she could worry about her embarrassment later. It took her several minutes to dry him off and change his clothes, even with the Kwame's help. Once that was done, she had put him up on her couch and wrapped him in a heating blanket, then 2 more blankets before finally getting out of her own wet things. Not knowing what else to do, she looked up information on drowning victims, and shocked to see if there's anything more that she should do. After 10 minutes passed, he had finally stopped shivering, but she was still worried, and she almost called the paramedics when his condition didn't seem to improve any. Tiki had stopped her, while Plag had curled up on his chest after downing an incredible amount of cheese. Even as Marinette voiced her fears, Plag simply grumbled, "He's exhausted, and on top of being drowned. He's in a really deep sleep right now, but he'll be okay. Believe us when we say that if he needed medical attention, more than what we told you, we would tell you." That comment made Marinette go silent, and feeling slightly useless staring at him, she went downstairs to make some hot soup, and to see if there was any more information on Aqueous floating around. Adrien came awake slowly. His mind was a hazy fog, and his body seemed almost irrationally heavy. Confusion was the main sensation, as he tried to understand what he was feeling. Was he dead? Adrien didn't feel dead, and as he finally managed to open up his eyes, he was laying on a soft couch as he realized he was warm and dry. Blinking slowly, he took in his surroundings and tried to figure out what exactly had happened to him. The last memory he had was being underwater and Aqueous trying to take his Miraculous. Jerking his hand up, fear surging through him, he was instantly relieved to see the silver bands sitting snugly on his finger. Then, as he looked beyond his hand, he suddenly recognized the room he was in. "What?" Adrien grunted as he sat up, a wave of dizziness sweeping him over, nearly making him fall back flat to the couch. Gently, Gently he pulled the blankets off of him, and saw that he didn't recognize he was in the clothes he was in. Blinking slowly, he took in the rest of his surroundings, and after a hazy moment, he really recognized where he was. "Marinette," he whispered, then flushed as he realized that she or Ladybug must have changed his clothes. "Ladybug brought you in here, you idiot. Do you know how hard it is to keep you alive when you drown?" Plag demanded, floating out from underneath one of the blankets. "Sorry, Plag. Where's Marinette?" Adrien asked, wondering if she knew who he was since Ladybug had brought him to her. "She's downstairs, making you something warm to eat," Plag answered, sounding miffed. The blankets pulled at his feet as Adrien swiftly stood, and he shivered slightly. His internal temperature had returned to normal, but going from super warm blankets to inside temperature was like walking into a fridge for a second. Hoping he wouldn't get sick from this whole ordeal, Adrian made his way carefully down the stairs, into the main living room. He was barefoot, so he didn't hardly even make a sound as he moved into the kitchen behind Marinette. To his relief, she was at the stove, pouring what looked like soup into a bowl, although, as he looked around, he didn't see Ladybug anywhere. "Marinette?" Adrian whispered, and her head jerked up, turning so that she could see him. "You're awake! Thank goodness! I was so worried," she said, dropping the pot to the stove and rushing at him to wrap him into a hug. He hugged her back a little worried, since he still didn't see Ladybug anywhere, but he figured he could ask questions as soon as Marinette had calmed down. After a long moment, Marinette pulled back and gently pressed a hand to his cheek, only to sigh in relief as she realized his skin was a normal temperature and color. His skin color now was far healthier too, but she was still unsure since something about him seemed the slightest bit off. "You seem like you're back to normal. How do you feel?" Marinette asked quietly. Confused?" Adrian answered, and Marinette nodded, tugging him for him to follow her off on the couch. Pulling him down so that he sat next to her, Marinette stared at him, wide-eyed and a touch worried. "I can answer any questions that you have. I'm sorry if I don't seem like much, but it's still me and I—" "Adrian?" Marinette said quietly, as she realized that he wasn't paying attention to her. His gaze was fixed on the TV, and for a moment she was offended, but then she realized what was on. Adrian's eyes were glued to the screen, an look of absolute horror on his face. There was a fight going on the screen, although the sound was turned down low enough that it was really just a murmur of background noise. Marinette grimaced as she watched the fight scene. It was from the earlier fight when she had sent Chat down to save the child, and the whole sequence left a bad taste in her mouth. Especially since they didn't even bother showing Chat fighting, or mention the fact that he had pulled the child from the underwater car. Instead, they were celebrating her bravery, and it made Marinette want to stomp over to the TV station and give them a piece of her mind. After a moment of watching Ladybug dodging and darting around bursts of water as Aqueous openly mocked her, Marinette hit the power button, causing the screen to go black. Missing the pained look in Adrian's eyes as his chest tightened painfully, Marinette reached out and took his hand. She said something that he didn't catch, because he could only think of what a fool he was. Ladybug was out there fighting, and he was sleeping and lazing about at his friend's house. It didn't matter to him that she had brought him here in the first place. Ladybug had to be exhausted from fighting as well, but she hadn't stayed to relax, not when Paris was in danger. True to form, Ladybug had gone right back out to fight. I have to go," Adrian said, and Marinette shook her head. "You have been practically passed out, dead to the world for the past hour or so. I almost called the paramedics because you were shivering and couldn't get you warm. You are not going back out there," Marinette snapped, and Adrian gazed at her in shock. "I've been out for an hour?" he cried, completely missing the rest of his sentence. Breaking free of her hands, Adrian darted back up into her room, calling out, "Plag, we need to go!" Marinette followed swiftly, climbing to her room as Adrian snatched his kwami from the air. "Adrian, you're not listening! If you would just hold on one sec—" "Marinette, please! Paris needs me. I'll explain when I come back," Adrian pleaded as she grabbed the shirt he wore and refused to let go. "You almost died!" she cried, and he froze staring at her, mouth opening and closing silently. I care about you a lot, and you almost died, and I was so scared, and I can't live without you being here. If something happened to you—" Marinette's voice was suddenly silenced, all protest gone as Adrian turned to her, and in the next minute his lips met hers. Warmth flooded through her as he pressed against her, one of his hands cupping her face as the other trailed along her back. She sighed into the kiss, relaxing into his arms, wondering if this is how the heroine felt when the hero kissed her. Adrian broke away far too soon for her liking, and he grinned at her as his hand brushed back some loose hair strands. "Sorry, Princess, but Ladybug in Paris needs me too. I'll be back, though, since I'll probably have quite a bit of explaining to do. Plag, claws out." Green light flashed, and just like that, Chat Noir stood in her bedroom. Even though she had already known, Marinette felt her jaw drop at his complete stupidity and recklessness. Cockily, he gave her a swift two-fingered salute, and was out her window before she could utter a single word. It took another 3 seconds for her mind to come back online, and in the moment it did, she screamed, "You idiot!" as loud as she could, startling Tiki from her nesting place. "Marinette? What's wrong?" she gasped, floating down to her charge. Marinette pounced on her phone, rapidly typing something out. "Adrian, Chat Noir, they're dense as a box of stupid damn rocks. The TV was showing a clip of my fight with Aqueous and he must have thought it was going on live. Then he just transformed right in front of me, after kissing me. He's nuts! Certifiably nuts. And I think he had to have hit his head because he's acting all irrational and stupid and, oh dear God, he's out there alone. Tiki, spot's on! Marinette cried as she tossed her phone onto her lounger. Ladybug was out the window in moments, moving as fast as she dared with the horrible conditions that rain, slippery rooftops, and dim afternoon lighting created. Chat had a head start on her, and she didn't want him running into Aqueous alone with no plan in place. This akuma had an unlimited supply of water, and since it was still raining, and even without the added terrible conditions, she would be a dangerous opponent. With a grimace, Ladybug launched herself high into the air, trying to discern Chat's location, wanting to get to his side as quickly as possible. "Marinette, are you going to tell him who you are?" Tiki asked. "If he gives me the chance, I will," Ladybug grumbled, and focused on the task at hand. After all, she had a cat to catch, and depending on her mood, quite possibly skin. It took Ladybug several panicked minutes of going full tilt to catch up to Chat. He was heading towards the scene of their previous battle, and once she was in range, Ladybug threw her yo-yo so that it crossed his path, just as about he was going to jump to the next building. Chat yelped and missed his landing, just barely catching the edge of the roof to prevent him from splatting against the ground. Not that it would kill him to hit the ground after falling 3 stories, but it would really hurt. Ladybug skidded to a halt right up before him, panting as she glared down at him through the rain. "What in the hell do you think you're doing out here?" she yelled, as she reached down to grab his hand. Chat winced, and for the moment, contemplating letting go so that he wouldn't have to face her wrath. Before he could even finish the thought, she had him by the arm in the back of his suit, hauling him up over the edge of the rooftop. To his surprise, she didn't drop him the moment his feet cleared the edge. Instead, she pulled him into a tight hug, and he could feel her heart racing beneath the thin fabric of their suits. "My lady?" he asked, his voice soft and confused. Ladybug pulled back, and Chat winced at the angry look in her eyes. "You stupid cat! What in the hell are you thinking coming out here? You almost died! You're in no condition to be out in the rain like this!" "I cannot let you face Aqueous alone, Ladybug. If you're in my place, you wouldn't stay away either," Chat answered. Ladybug huffed, and then let out a low growl, mumbling something unintelligible as the rain continued to come down harder. Chat caught the word concussed, and then, as her eyes met his, the flat, worried glare she leveled at him made him swallow hard. "I'm sorry?" Chat tried, and Ladybug's face fell as she shook her head. "No, don't be sorry. It's my fault for not keeping Aqueous properly distracted as you saved the kid. I should have used the ink earlier. However, your heart stopped. Or it was beating so faint that I couldn't find a pulse. Thank God I know how to do CPR," Ladybug managed, her voice trembling slightly at the end. Chat rubbed the back of his neck, feeling a bit sheepish. He had scared Ladybug, and apparently Marinette badly. Now he was feeling guilty about running out on her when he saw the video clip of Ladybug fighting Aqueous. "The fight," Chat muttered, causing Ladybug to look up at him. "Weren't you fighting Aqueous just now? Where is she?" Ladybug shook her head, throwing water every which way. "The TV keeps showing me fighting Aqueous from earlier. I've got a half a mind to go down there and yell at them for it. But that doesn't matter. What were you thinking rushing out and transforming in front of Marinette?" Chat's eyes went wide, and he cringed as Ladybug berated herself. It was such a habit to refer to her civilian form as a different person. However, it was a habit she would need to break if she was going to tell Chat who she was. "I'm sorry?" Chat managed again, and after a moment looking like a kicked puppy, he gazed at her wide-eyed and mournful. Marinette's really trustworthy, and I'm dating her as a civilian. Or I would like to be. Ladybug felt her heart kick almost painfully in her chest at his words. Chat, I need to tell you who I am. Your transformation so I know who you are, and honestly, it would only be fair. To her surprise, Chat shook his head. No, Ladybug, don't. It's okay. I don't need to know who you are. You should be able to reveal yourself because you want to, not because you feel you have to. Besides, now that Marinette knows, she can always patch me up when I do something stupid. I'm sorry you had to find out who I was because I nearly died, drowned. Chat, it might be easier if you know, Ladybug whispered, and Chat glanced up at her, looking a bit confused. What do you mean? Chat asked. Ladybug sighed, one hand moving to slick the water out of her face, when she froze and looked up. It had suddenly, all at once, stopped raining, and as she looked up into the sky, she found a layer of water rapidly forming above them. Run! Ladybug barked and bolted forward, grabbing Chat's arm as he gaped at the water ceiling. They cleared the edge as the rain fell, instantly covering them once more with a wall of collected rainwater. Ideas? Chat cried as he slid across the rooftop just ahead of her. Ladybug twisted, spinning her yo-yo, taking a water blast head-on and skidding back almost to where he was, crouched, yelling, The park! Chat turned tail and ran, with Ladybug following swiftly behind. Spikes of water impaled the roof around them, trying to build a wall, and they charged through it, sliding the whole way down the other side of the roof. Jumping the next set of buildings, Ladybug eyed the mass of water that was following them, and ran several ideas through her head. Swiftly, they ran out of room to run, and they could just make out the hazy open space of the park between them, through the rain around them. Hitting the edge of the roof and using their respective weapons to slow their descent to the ground, the duo charged into the park, taking cover under one of the thicker trees. The trees were large old things that had thick canopies, and thankfully, as soon as they hit the edge of the branches, the rain slacked off. Huddling beneath one of the massive things, Chat eyed the area surrounding them, on the lookout for any surges of water. Ladybug was doing the same thing, and after a moment, deeming it was safe, she turned towards him. So, what now? Chat asked, shivering slightly. Ladybug eyed him critically, and he grinned at her. You're not getting rid of me, so don't even try, he said, and Ladybug gritted her teeth to prevent herself from saying something snappish. We need to figure out a way to keep Aquia solid long enough to get those goggles off of her. How do you keep water solid, though? Ladybug answered, deciding to ignore the shivering for now and chew him out for it as Marinette later. Let's see. Solid water. Jello, maybe? Chat replied, then hissed as they looked down at their feet. Water was surging into the area, rising up around their ankles, and Ladybug pointed up. Into the trees. We can use those and the statues of this park to stay up out of the water. Chat nodded. I'll distract her. You see if you can get those goggles. But, Ladybug began, and Chat shook his head. I can move easier in the trees, so I'm better as a distraction. Besides, we need a long-range attack to snatch the goggles from her, since the water will probably warm her if you come in too close. Ladybug bit her lip even as she nodded. Fine, but I swear, if you do anything stupid, I'll tell Marinette not to give you those macarons you like so much. Chat grabbed his chest, pretending to faint. You wound me, my lady, he cried in mock distress, then leapt into the branches above their head. Besides, define stupid. Ladybug chuckled, letting some of the tension she felt ease off, then threw her yo-yo into the tree, pulling herself from the nearly shin-deep water. They moved through the trees until they finally found a decent spot to attempt their ambush. The trees were scattered around a circular open space, with a larger horse statue in the center. A power pole stood nearby with the light already on in the fading day, giving them more illumination to work with. Water was already rising higher and even in this area, and Ladybug knew that, for better or for worse, they needed to finish this now before it got any later. Catching Chat's gaze, she pointed to the area before them and flashed a thumbs up. Chat grinned at her as she climbed higher into the trees until she had a good perch. Then she watched as Chat worked his annoying magic. Darting off a thicker branch, he used his baton to completely avoid the rising water, and landed neatly on the large cast-iron statue of the horse. "My little mermaid! Oh, dear siren, can you come please give me a wave?" Chat called. "Well, well, well, I guess that they say about true cats and 9 lives is true," a bubbly voice said, as Aqueous started to take form before the statue. Thankfully, the rain eased off, toning it down to a light mist as Ladybug started to move closer. "Yeah, well, I'd rather not lose any more today, otherwise I'll get into some deep trouble. I really don't want to be hung out to dry, so can we just pull the plug?" Chat asked. Aqueous snorted, and Chat perked up. His ears twitched, and then suddenly he shook, spraying water everywhere, to Aqueous's delighted laugh. "You are so very silly, but there's far too much afloat for me to run off now." Chat beamed at her. "It's too bad I'm not a catfish. We get along swimmingly." 2 trees away, Ladybug smothered a groan, even as Aqueous laughed again. "Yeah, we're 2 fins and—" She froze suddenly, and Chat stiffened as Hawkmoth's mask covered her face. Instantly, her face fell, and without another word her arms rose, the water following silently after. "Hand over your Miraculous, and I'll let you swim away with your life intact." Ladybug moved into position, and as she made contact with Chat, she nodded. Chat grinned easily. "Sorry, but I'm not one for swimming. Let's just finish our conversation," and water swarmed the statue, and he leapt backwards, shooting his baton down at the ground so that it launched him back into the sturdy branches of the trees. Moving forward, Ladybug threw her yo-yo, aiming for Aqueous's head, and was shocked as it passed right through. Aqueous grabbed the yo-yo as it passed through her, and yanked hard enough to pull Ladybug off the branch she was perched on. Twisting at the last second, Ladybug managed to grab a branch before she fell out of the tree completely, and Aqueous turned an amused look on her face as she released her yo-yo. The yo-yo snapped back to Ladybug's hand as Aqueous said, "I already know how long the kitty can hold his breath. Let's see how long the bug can manage." A spiral of water shot at her, and Ladybug released the branch, tossing the yo-yo out to swing forward. The standing water beneath her surged upwards as the spiral missed, and there wasn't a single thing that she could do to avoid it. The water struck her hard enough to knock the air out of her, and she was tumbling end over end as the surge turned over on itself. She came to a stop. Ladybug opened her eyes, and she found herself floating in a spiral of water, as Aqueous watched her, looking bemused. Jerking her yo-yo back into her hand, Ladybug tried to swim forward, but the moment she did, the water surged around her, tumbling her like she was a piece of clothing in the dryer. Panic sheared through her mind, and Tiki yelled, "Don't panic, Marinette! Think!" Clamping one hand tight over her mouth, she threw the yo-yo with all her strength at the statue. The water moved with the yo-yo, slowing it to the point that it didn't even make it halfway there. Pulling back to recall the yo-yo, she tried moving forward once more. The water around her churned and slammed her down into the street, crushing her to the ground. Ladybug's lungs burned, and she made out a burst of sound coming from outside the bubble of water that was pounding against her like a waterfall, effectively pinning her to the cobbles. The area before her was distorted from the water, but she could see Chat darting forward as he tried to take Aqueous out. He simply burst through her, and a mumbled sound told her that Aqueous was laughing. In the next instant, water swarmed Chat, and although he tried to jump away once more, he found himself held down by the water by his boots. Chat thrashed as the water covered his head, although he managed to take a deep breath before the water fully coated him again. "Not again. Never again," Ladybug thought, and pressed her hands down into the cobbles, bringing all of her strength to bear as she slowly pushed against the water that held her to the street. "You can do it, Marinette!" Tiki cried in her mind, as she suddenly somehow managed to pull herself to her feet. Chat saw what she was doing, and ignoring his desire to attempt to escape, he decided to keep Aqueous from noticing. So he flailed and started clawing at the water, as Aqueous laughed at him, completely distracted by his antics. Managing to stay upright, Ladybug pointed at her weapon, then pointed at herself, hoping that he would understand what she wanted. He did, and in the next instant he twisted his staff towards her, finger hitting the button so that it elongated. The staff whooshed out and smashed into Ladybug, sending her flying outside of her watery prison. Gasping the moment her head met the air, she crashed into the cobbles and yanked on the staff. "No!" Aqueous screeched as she turned around, then Chat collapsed the staff. Since Ladybug held the one end, it jerked him free from his own prison and right through Aqueous, breaking her up once more. "Stupid heroes!" Aqueous screamed, and Ladybug wrapped her yo-yo around a branch, pulling the two of them to safety, however brief. "My lady?" Chat coughed as they landed on a thick branch. "Working on it," Ladybug gasped, and in the next instant, she threw her yo-yo up, calling, "Lucky charm!" Light coalesced into a bag and dropped into her hands. The bag was far heavier than she had expected, and it nearly caused her to tumble right out of the tree. Chat grabbed her, and in the next instant, he sent them flying to a new spot as water smashed the branch that they had been on to splinters. "Plan?" he practically begged as they landed on a forked branch and he set her down. Ladybug looked down as the world seemed to gray out. Aqueous flashed, then the power pole flashed, then the heavy bag flashed as she noticed the white powder leaking from one corner. "Flour?" Ladybug murmured, all at once understanding. Glancing up, her eyes met Chat's and she smiled. "Hit that pole with Cataclysm, and make sure that you're not in the water when it comes down. Got it?" Realization dawned, and he nodded, darting off the branch as water surged between them. Ladybug darted away as well, taunting Aqueous as she did. Aqueous surged after her, smashing through the branches until finally there were no lower ones left to really land on. Hoping that she had given Chat enough time, she swung back into the center, with Aqueous following swiftly after her. After hitting the edge of the statue, Ladybug swung, throwing the flour bag and her yo-yo at the same time, cutting it open. The bag exploded as Aqueous smashed into it, coating her in flour and sending her crashing to a screech to the now ankle-deep water that covered the clearing. "Now!" Ladybug yelled as she threw her yo-yo once more at and a large crack echoed off to her left. "What did you do to me?" Aqueous squealed as she flung gobs of flour from her face, not even noticing the transformer falling towards the water. Ladybug's feet hit a high branch, and Chat landed next to her a moment later, watching as the transformer hit the ground. A moment later, they both twisted away from the explosion of light and sound that resulted from the transformer striking the water. Heat and a sizzling sound hissed through the air, bringing with it the taste of ozone. Slowly, the two heroes turned back to the clearing, watching as the electricity cut out, sending a final few arcs into the statue before stopping entirely. Aqueous lay on her side in the ankle-deep water, and Ladybug moved down the branch until Chat stopped her. "What if the electricity hasn't fully dispersed?" Chat demanded, as she hooked a yo-yo over a nearby branch. A groan interrupted them as Aqueous shifted slightly in the water, and both heroes let out a sigh of relief. "I'll just have to hope that it is. Stay here just in case, okay?" Ladybug said. And although Chat didn't like it, he did as she asked, realizing that if she did need help, he could pull her out from his position. Swinging down into the water, Ladybug moved forward, noticing that the water was not only warm, but it was rapidly draining off since Aqueous was practically unconscious. Arriving at her side, Ladybug reached down and pulled the now solid goggles off her head. Snapping the band, she tossed them to the ground, calling out, "Come on out, you nasty thing!" A black butterfly wiggled out slowly and took to the air almost drunkenly, as if it were still stunned. Catching it was easy, and holding the yo-yo flat in her hand, she pressed a finger to the surface, releasing a white butterfly from within. "Bye-bye, little butterfly," Ladybug called, as Chat landed in the water next to her, handing her the empty flour bag. Taking the bag with a smile, she tossed it high into the air, calling, "Miraculous Cleanse!" The bag burst high overhead, sending shoots of light off in every direction. One shoot swept around them, the water vanishing, the pole going back to normal, and Aqueous turned back into a normal human being. Slowly they groaned, sitting up with Ladybug's help. "Are you okay?" Ladybug asked as they opened up their eyes. "I think so. What happened?" Eva asked, managing to stand with some help. "You were akuma-sized, and we kind of dropped a transformer on you to stop you," Chad answered, only to be swatted by Ladybug. Eva's eyes went wide. "Oh, I'm sorry? I didn't hurt anyone, did I?" Ladybug shook her head. "No need to worry. We took care of everything. Will you be okay getting home, though? The storm's only going to get worse." Eva looked around her, nodding. "I live near here, so I should be fine. she answered before walking down a path towards one of the exits. As she disappeared down the path, Ladybug turned to Chat as her earrings beeped. "You should head out, my lady," Chat said. His ring gave its own beep. Ladybug shook her head. "There's no need, Chat. I already know who you are, and I know for a fact that you're trustworthy." Chat sighed, raising one clawed hand up to scratch the back of his neck, in a gesture so familiar that Ladybug couldn't believe how blind she had been. "It's the magic. It protects who you are. Otherwise, everyone would be able to tell," Tiki said, as if she were reading her mind. Her earrings beeped again and Ladybug sighed. "Chat," she started, then jerked back as he pressed a gentle finger to his lips. "I'm pretty sure you're going to call me stupid again and think I'm being silly when I say that you don't have to reveal yourself. However, I want to give you some time to think about it. I will go to Marinette's house, and she'll make sure that I stay okay. Next time there is an akuma attack, if you still want to tell me, you can, okay?" Chat said with such conviction that Ladybug was shocked. She was offering what he had wanted since day one of meeting her, and even after his own terrifying reveal, he was looking out for her. It took her a moment to gather her thoughts, and he was already backing away. "You are a noble idiot," Ladybug finally answered, and he gave her the biggest Cheshire grin as he bowed. "But I'm your idiot. Although, you have to share with Marinette now," Chat chuckled. Ladybug snorted at the irony and waved a hand, not wanting to keep him in the rain any longer. "Scat, cat," she said, and with a final grin he leapt away. She watched until he disappeared, a smile on her face, relishing how nice the rain felt, when suddenly Tiki asked, "Marinette, isn't he going to your house?" Ladybug's eyes snapped open. "Not again!" she squealed, and took off in Chat's footsteps, hoping that he was going slow. "How do I get myself into these situations?" Ladybug cried, as she launched herself in a dangerous move that sent her flying over 2 buildings. "You should have told him. Then you wouldn't be in this situation," Tiki replied. "I tried," Ladybug complained, although she had to admit that she didn't try all that hard. "In any case, you heard what he said." Tiki made a disgruntled noise in the back of her mind, as Ladybug shot across a gap, swiping water from her eyes as the rain started to pick up once more. Thankfully, she knew these streets like the back of her hand, and as she swung down into an alley across the street from her home, she shouted, "Spots off!" as her feet hit the ground. Catching Tiki and clutching her to her chest, she darted out, running down the sidewalk as she dropped Tiki into her purse. The lights in the bakery were still off, although the light in her room was on, and so far she didn't see Chat on her roof or in her room. As her feet hit the middle of the street, a strong pair of arms suddenly swept around her, causing her to let out a very undignified shriek. "Please tell me you're not out in this catastrophic weather looking for poor little old me," Chat's voice asked as he deposited her on her balcony. Her trap door was already open, and Marinette wondered if he had been watching the streets looking for her. Spinning around, Marinette nearly threw her purse at his smug face. "You scared the life out of me, and unlike you, I don't have 8 more. What were you thinking?" Chat chuckled, one hand reaching up to scratch the back of his neck when thunder suddenly boomed. With a yowl, he darted forward, slamming into Marinette, and together they tumbled through her trap door and right onto her bed. They bounced once, and in a flash of green light, his transformation came undone, leaving Adrien to burrow his head into Marinette's shoulder. The unexpected tackle left Marinette in a fit of giggles that worsened when Adrien pulled back enough to scowl at her. The trap door closed behind them, knocked off its hinges from his tackle. Sorry, I'm not laughing at you," Marinette managed, forcing herself to stop. "That was just so unexpected, and—" A large crack of thunder boomed right overhead, shaking the house with its force, and Adrien suddenly clung to her, gripping her hard enough that she almost couldn't breathe. Suddenly, Marinette realized her error, and she swiftly wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight. "Oh, Adrien, I'm sorry. It's okay, I'm here," she whispered, brushing one hand over his hair in a soothing rhythm. His hair was soaked, as were the clothes he wore, and Marinette wasn't quite sure if his shivers were from the storm or the cold. Holding him for a minute longer, Marinette sighed as she felt the first tremors run through her own body. The air inside was starting to get to her, and gently she rubbed Adrien's back. "Adrien, I realize that you don't like storms, but we need to dry off and get warm. You especially, she whispered. Adrian shifted slightly. I hate storms, he muttered, still not releasing his hold on her. It's okay to hate them, but you're with me now, which means I'll keep you safe through them, okay? Marinette asked, causing Adrian to pull back and look at her. I can be clingy, Adrian said, as he gazed at her, as if he was trying to figure something out. I don't mind. I can be very possessive. And besides, you're warm, Marinette answered easily. The air huffed out of Adrian's lungs in a laugh, before he leaned down once more to press his forehead to hers. Their lips were scant inches apart, and Marinette could feel her heart kick up a notch in her chest. Marinette, will you be my girlfriend? Adrian asked. A blush heated her face, and Marinette had to bite back a squeal. Taking a deep breath, Marinette managed to answer without a single stutter. I would love to be. A smile lit up Adrian's face, and even as thunder crashed behind them, he didn't even flinch. Marinette had said yes. She had accepted both sides of him, and Adrian couldn't stop the giggle from escaping his lips. The lights around them flickered as the storm raged outside, and Marinette turned her head, glancing at something that he didn't quite catch. Come on, silly kitty. Let's get warm and dry before we get sick. I'll make you some hot chocolate, Marinette sighed. She didn't want to move or get up either, but they were both soaked, and as it was, she was going to have to change her sheets, as well as her clothes. Adrian pouted, but relented this time, following her down the ladder to the bathroom. Marinette got him another set of clothes, and threw all of their wet things, including her sheets, into the dryer, before they settled into the living room with some hot chocolate. Adrian couldn't say when he had had a better night, and although he tried to fight it, he eventually fell asleep, safe in his princess's arms, content at last. This is the end of Rising Water. Stay tuned for more.